The San Francisco Art Institute sits on the northeastern slope of Russian Hill, overlooking North Beach, Telegraph Hill, Treasure Island, and Berkeley. A fitting location for Rigo's monumental sculpture of Leonard Peltier, Native American activist, inspecting the sacred ground of Alcatraz, the site of the American Indian movement's occupation in the early 1970s. An SFAI alumni, Rigo's work is always connected with the real world, the way we view the city, and the way we view struggles of civil rights. SFAI's location, its sense of place, is crucial to understand the importance to the school. But more importantly are the people who have populated the school since its founding in 1871. People intrigued with art and new ideas, and also with innovations, like Edward Muybridge, who screened what has been heralded as the world's first moving picture at the school in 1880, proving that a horse's hooves all come off the ground when galloping. Robert Aitken studied at the school and became a noted sculptor of public works, including the frieze above the U.S. Supreme Court, where he did portraits of noted jurists and managed to include himself. Yun Ji, a student in the 1920s, was one of the key artists to bring modern European painting to the West Coast. Yun Ji organized the Chinese Revolutionary Artists Society with fellow students, mixing art with social justice. Sergeant Johnson, an African-American artist who is well known for monumental New Deal art projects at San Francisco's Aquatic Park and George Washington High School. Johnson was so highly respected among his peers that he became one of the supervisors of those 1930s WPA projects, and of course is noted for this marvelous sculpture at the San Francisco Museum of Art, Forever Free. David Johnson made his way as a 17-year-old to serve in World War II, where he experienced the last years of a totally segregated Navy. After the war, he returned to Florida and pursued the idea of becoming a photographer. He was the youngest student in that first full photography class begun by Ansel Adams and the only African American. As David says, he felt he was dropped through the rabbit hole and into the realm of photographic geniuses. Those luminaries included Ansel Adams, Edward Weston and Minor White, Dorothea Lange, and Imogen Cunningham. Mark Rothko taught at the school in 1947 and then again in 1949. He taught painting classes and lecture courses about contemporary art. In the lecture class, he gave everybody an A. In painting, all the students received a B, figuring everyone, including himself, was still wrestling with how to paint. And in the lecture classes, everyone's opinion was equal. I hope I haven't violated that FERPA form that I just signed. Rothko was certainly influential to this mature set of post-World War II students, but Rothko also learned much from these students, as can be seen in the changes from his 1944 painting Slow Swirl at the Edge of the Sea prior to his teaching to his 1948 work in transition in between his time teaching here, and then what is considered his established style by early 1950. And he certainly was a hands-on teacher by all accounts, evidence from this roll book, which shows a sketch in his hand that resembles Slow Swirl. When Joan Brown, at 17, arrived in the school's courtyard from Catholic high school, she saw a sandal-wearing, bearded, smoking beatnik playing bongos, and she knew this was the place for her. Her paintings were stellar, and she made an impact immediately, enough to show up on the cover of an early issue of Art Forum. Ed Hardy was a student of Joan Brown's and also studied printmaking with Gordon Cook. Hardy's etching for his BFA exhibition was titled Future Plans. Although Hardy was only lightly tattooed at the time, his shirtless self-portrait shows the fully tattooed future he envisioned for himself. Hardy turned down a fellowship to Yale and decided to pursue tattooing. He writes that some were appalled at my ditching high art for a bastardized sailor town craft, while others applauded the weirdness of it. In 1976, painting faculty member and alum Carlos Villa organized an exhibition at the Art Institute that introduced multiculturalism to the art world, titled Other Sources, an American Essay, which embraced all contemporary art, whether from San Jose, Samoa, or Park Avenue, an egalitarian assemblage. Howard Freed, a student in the 1960s, began teaching video courses at the school in the early 1970s within the sculpture department, which later broke off into its own performance video department. Examples of Freed's work from this period include All My Dirty Blue Clothes and his enigmatic conceptual video piece, The Burgers of Fort Worth, where he took a simultaneous golf lesson from 4 golf pros in Fort Worth, Texas. Paul Koss was part of that initial faculty of the PV department, now known as the New Genres department. Koss's elegant Chartres Blue is a set of video monitors documenting the stained glass panels of Chartres Cathedral, compressing a full day's sunlight into 12 minutes. There's always been this fascinating non-studio faculty at the school. The anthropologist Gregory Bateson, Frank Oppenheimer, who founded the Exploratorium in San Francisco, Bernard Mays, a gay Anglican Episcopalian priest who started the first suicide hotline in the world out of his home in the early 1960s, Black liberation movement activist Angela Davis, who taught from the 1970s into the 1990s, the punk writer Kathy Acker, who taught in both the Humanities Department and in the New Genres Department, and the poet Bill Berkson, who taught art writing seminars, art history, poetry, and organized dozens of dynamic lecture series. Karen Topakian, who is shown here at a gay pride parade in the 1980s mocking conservative homophobes, studied film with the marvelous George Kuchar. Kuchar is represented at the school to this day by alumni and faculty member Christopher Coppola, who studied with George and makes sure that the Kuchar legacy lives on in Studio 8, a.k.a. Studio Kuchar. Karen is a terrific example of someone who took her freedom to explore art, film, and the world at SFAI and coupled it with her passion for progressive ideas, eventually becoming chair of the board of Greenpeace. At the 2016 presidential inaugural, you might remember the resist protest on the crane above the White House. Well, that was Karen, and there is a fine little short film about her activism, Arrested Again, evidence of good trouble, in the words of John Lewis. Other terrific filmmakers and ones who have won Academy Awards include Catherine Bigelow, the first woman to win for directing, Laura Poitras for Citizen4, Peter Powell for cinematography in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Ruby Yang for documentary. Native American student Zig Jackson studied photography in the 1990s and decided to make all of San Francisco his reservation. Thus, here is Zig in front of San Francisco City Hall, at Golden Gate Park, and at Alamo Square, using that sense of place, San Francisco, with a relevant twist. Barry McGee, a printmaker, painter, and graffiti artist, part of a large set of folk loosely known as the Mission School, along with Ruby Neri and Alicia McCarthy, all studied at SFAI, bringing artwork to the streets of the city. Zylor Jane was part of this mix as well, with elegant work based on math, science, and intuition. Her painting of the T-cell graces the San Francisco Art Institute's library. Zylor writes about the school, quote, "It is just insane how gorgeous the Art Institute is. It is like an aircraft carrier slapped on top of a monastery. It is basically an outdoor studio and very inspiring." Kehinde Wiley studied painting and moved on to be a chronicler of hip-hop culture, who in 2018 unveiled his official portrait of President Barack Obama, and in 2019 installed his sculpture Rumors of War, a biting indictment of Confederate monuments, first shown in Times Square and then permanently installed in front of the Richmond, Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. We'll end with a projection upon the SFAI Tower, back to that hallowed ground, from election night 2020. This still from a video by a collective attached to the Center for Creative Activism, with two of its members, SFAI alumni Jessica Tully and Steve Lambert. So there are plenty of things to do. There was an assignment given to students by a faculty member named Jim Pomeroy some time ago. Find an interesting place and make it more interesting. A very good assignment, and SFAI on Russian Hill has always been a really good place to do it.